doesn't use my phone.
It does.
We
I
are
would have got that
live.
out for you.
Okay.
That's not insignificant.
Yeah, right. And I couldn't find that number.
I know you couldn't because they didn't. Just next time.
It would be good to listen to.
Never do that.
We are live.
Right. Okay, so we're live. Yeah,
That's a
thank
good
you.
one.
Yeah.
Are you one of the people who wants to go?
It's Senate Appropriations, May 1st, May Day. We are taking up H 481, Stormwater Management Bill, coming to us from Senate Natural Resources and Energy. So I don't know if you want to give us a quick run over.
Where's Watson to take the witness seat?
Yeah, you could move.
We got a maker.
Oh, I could.
Could a maker sit there.
No, I'll just sit right here. So,
Oh.
because I can. So I want to speak broadly to what this bill is trying to address. So in general, I think folks know that we have phosphorus impaired Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog. And so we have a TMDL from the EPA about how to, that we need to meet these specific phosphorus reduction targets. A part of that is, so there's different sectors that have to address the phosphorus reduction. One is forested lands, another is agriculture, but a third is developed lands. And so as a part of that, we get something called the 3-acre rule. And so are you familiar with the 3-acre rule? I'm happy to, yeah, okay. So,
No, I'm familiar with it. Don't go for it.
okay.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
So short version, like so the deadline for people to have gotten their 3-acre permits is past due at this point. And so there's a lot of concern about people, receiving letters, they're not in compliance, what do we do? It's very expensive to do these kinds of projects. So this bill, sort of broadly speaking, it does 3 main things. One is it extends the deadline for compliance 5 years from what it was, but it's only 3 years away. So they have 3 more years to get in compliance. And then it moves money, it moves how some of the money can be spent from the Clean Water Fund to ensure that more money can go to these kinds of projects. And then the third thing is that there is a study committee in here. So there's no like big appropriation that comes from the general fund. There would be like per diems associated with the study committee about it's mainly about regionalization of stormwater utilities with the intention that stormwater utilities would be a great tool to help get oh gosh, there's so many layers here. There are some residual issues with like what we call orphan permits, so it may be a good solution for that. But basically, we want to put ourselves in a position where we're not here again in 3 years with people not being in compliance and being too, having the situation again just continue to be too expensive. So, and because we do still need to keep our phosphorus reductions for the developed lands part of the TMBL. So I'm going to leave going through the specifics to Ledge Council or JFO, but that is sort of the high level of what this does sort of broadly. Other thing I would highlight is we did have in the budget the sunset of the repeal of the sunset of the surcharge on the property transfer tax that goes into the Clean Water Fund. So you've already seen part of this already.
Is that the clean water surcharge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So,
Okay, any questions for Senator Watson?
I don't know if I should be asking Senator Watson or Mike when he comes up. I'm just wondering why Magog and Lake Champlain?
they're impaired for phosphorus. They have too much phosphorus in them, and they've been identified by the EPA as such.
What about like Lake Carmine, which is the first laking crisis in Vermont? That's kind of phosphorus.
That is a Michael question.
Okay, I'll let him make it. He's heard the questions. What do you say?
Sure. We can address that.
So should I answer that question now?
I think that, yeah.
So Metro Magog and Champlain have significant TMDLs over broad, vast waters, whereas Karma, even though it is impaired, the TMDL they have for it doesn't need the developed lands permit in order to come back into compliance. There isn't, except for the camp, there isn't anything that's subject to the 3 acre there.
Yeah.
And so they're bringing the camp into compliance anyway. And so application of a 3 acre to Karma really is irrelevant, basically.
That makes sense, yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about the financial aspect of it, or should we just go to fiscal?
Whatever you want to do, I'm prepared to do either.
I mean, if nobody has questions about the bill, I don't think we need a run through. I think we.
I mean, I could give.
I just, one quick one. When you mentioned it might change the way the money is allowed to be spent, I don't know where the agricultural fairs, the 4 fairs that receive money, if that's part of this or the separate pot of money.
So,
You know what I'm talking about?
you mean in order to comply with the 3 acre?
Yeah, they received grant awards, 4 different fairs that were identified of, I think, $500,000 a piece. I don't know if that money came out of the Clean Water Fund or where it came from, but does it affect the way they can spend the money?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Because
And,
some of those are already underway, I understand, so.
right, and the agency's working, most of the fairs that are subject to it are working towards compliance. Rutland has site constraints that will make it very difficult. The agency's working with Rutland State Fair to meet the basically the load reductions while not overburdening their finances.
Good, thank you.
So just the fiscal aspects?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can go to page 3. That is, well, actually, let's go to page 4. That is the repeal of the sunset of the property transfer tax clean water surcharge. I think you all know there was a need for dedicated clean water money that EPA required for the Lake Champlain TMDL. This was the first source of that dedicated money. It was a 0.2% surcharge on the property transfer tax, and James can tell you over $200,000 or $250,000, depending on how it was financed. You were going to repeal that surcharge in 2027, but not totally repeal it. You were going to reduce it to 0.04, and that 0.04 was going to be used to pay off a bond that was issued in 2018 for housing. And currently the first $1 million of the clean water surcharge goes into the Vermont Housing and Transportation Trust to pay off that bond. So what this does, and then that would have repealed in 2039 when the bond was paid off. But this repeals both of those sunsets, the 2027, which would have reduced it from 0.2 to 0.04, and then the repeal of it totally in 2039. The agency will tell you that the need for the funding is there, whether or not it's 3 acre, whether or not it's wastewater treatment, whether or not it's municipal roads, multi-sector. The need is there for these dollars. And so you can see on page 4, line 11, section 2, the 2 main sunsets of the clean water surcharge are repealed. Sections 3, 4, and 5 are all conforming amendments, because when you did that bond in 2018, you wrote a lot of intent and purpose language into it. And you cited a lot of dates in that intent and purpose language, and I had to go through and change those to make sure that they were consistent with the intent of this act. So you'll see things like on page 5, lines 7 through 9, reference to the not later than July 1, 2027, because that's when the surcharge reduces from 0.2 to 0.04. And by the way, it's 0.22. You raised it from 0.2 to 0.22 last session.
And there's not a new sunset. You just repealed the sunset.
You just repealed the sunset. The way that the property transfer tax works is in statute. The way that the surcharge works, it's in statute. Nothing is changing to that. It's just all this session law behind the scenes, effective dates that need to change.
And maybe this is a question for Senator Watson, but did the House or the Senate consider adding a new sunset date or
No,
year?
for the property transfer tax,
Yeah.
we did not. There is another thing that we added to sunset to, but not.
And the feeling is just like in perpetuity, we will need stormwater funds.
And until we get indications that.
The House
it's not.
committee did discuss it, but they just landed on the spot that when they need to repeal it, when you need to repeal it, you will have that opportunity. You don't necessarily know when that is right now, but you can always repeal it if you want to. So the next fiscal aspect is on page 6. As Senator Watson noted earlier, there are these existing financing programs for water quality. One is the Developed Lands Program, and one is the Municipal Implementation Program. Currently, they're grant programs, and currently they are limited to when a clean water service provider in the watershed meets its annual goal. The clean water service providers aren't meeting their annual goals. And then the grants are very limiting on the agency. So the agency wants to move away from just a grant program and to allow them to be more creative with financing under both of these programs and to take away that condition that the clean water service providers are meeting their annual goals in order for there to be an award. So
why would you take that away?
Because the money just doesn't move then. Because if they're not meeting so the clean water service providers are those entities that you set up in about 2019 that work to get non-regulatory clean water programs completed. So people that are subject to permitting, they have to do their permitting under the regulatory scheme. A&R is dedicated to that. A&R can't also do all the non-regulatory programs that are needed to meet the TMDLs in both Champlain and Metro Magog. So you created these entities, whether or not they're RPCs or economic development, that are designated to try to coordinate these non-regulatory water quality projects. But that's harder than it sounds. Finding people that are going to agree to them on their land because you need access to them.
Or could you just lower the goal instead of just saying there isn't going to be a test to get the funding?
Well, I think you could if you wanted to do that, but this just opens up that money to be to more freely move where it needs to move, especially in those municipalities with the 3-acre parcels and the other parcel-based issues. It's not just 3-acre.
Right. I mean, the whole basin would be eligible,
Right.
because the provider's not renewing.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's the financial impact of that is that, I mean, they still want to do the project, so it doesn't change the end, it just maybe speeds up the money. How fast
It speeds up the money to get it out there. Think of it this way, in a town like Richmond, where that watershed, the clean water service provider is not yet meeting its goals, but there's a 3-acre parcel there that has some particular and specific problems, parcel-based problems. They can't get access to this money right now.
Okay.
But then the agency is going to change it from a grant to financing, and so maybe they'll use a low interest loan, maybe they'll use no interest loan, maybe they'll, So a combination of both, so that you can move money to those subdivisions, those parcels that right now can't get it because of these limitations.
It's also sort of like, why would you punish somebody why would you take away resources from somebody that's not meeting their goals to help enable them to meet their goals?
Well, maybe because they're not trying,
Possible.
or, you want to fight somebody else.
Right.
But yeah, if you want to lower the TMDL, then you want to fight somebody to get them.
Yeah.
So you will see reference in both the developed lands and the municipal stormwater program to allowing this to be used for the 3-acre permit, but it's also going to be there for those other parcel-based issues like the orphan systems. That's where there's no homeowners association that will take on the permitting and the property owners won't agree to on things of that nature. So it is available for those types of issues. So moving out of those two programs, you can come to page 8, section 7. When you set up the Clean Water Fund, you directed the board to make priority recommendations to the governor and to you annually. There's 3 tiers. One of those tiers is one of those tiers is the second tier, but in that second tier, you will see on page 10, well, actually page 9 going on to page 10, is that municipal stormwater implementation program. That is a second tier priority, and it would be amended to provide that at least $1 million a year would be recommended for the cost of complying with the permitting requirements under 1264 C7, which is stormwater and specifically 3-acre. Now, this is just to recommend. Remember, you all know how the Clean Water Fund works. They give you what they propose as a budget, and you can amend that.
Have we ever amended it?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. But it generally does move as the board recommends. To jumpstart that program, the municipal program, page 10, line 14, in fiscal year 2027, you're directing the board to recommend $5 million go into that fund to get it capitalized so that money can move there.
Okay.
And then the next is the study committee, page 16.
Favorite thing.
Pardon?
Our favorite thing.
There are no legislators on it.
That was going to be my first thing.
There are 8 people, potentially 9 with an amendment that will likely be offered. They are going to meet over 2 years to look at the issue of the feasibility and benefit of creating regional stormwater utility districts to facilitate implementation and compliance with water quality laws in the state. They don't have a meeting limitation. I did not put that in there because it's a long time frame, and I don't know how often they will meet, but there is no meeting limitation, which is something that dictates cost.
And is it the sense that we wouldn't be paying any per diems?
So they would, the language allows them to get per diems, but it's paid out of the Agency of Natural Resources budget.
So, can I ask a backup question away from that?
Sure.
So we start the money and this envisions surplus money out of the fund to be used. Are we setting ourselves up for the surplus money to go away and we're gonna have to raise these fees again?
I don't know if it is requiring the movement of surplus. There will need to be some reallocation in the Clean Water Fund's
Well, in 26,
recommendation.
it says 10 million of the clean water, go from the capital bill, and then 7.5 one-time funds from unallocated, unreserved clean water fund reserve.
That's the FY26 budget. This is gonna be for FY27.
Well, the chart that they show, shows using, surplus money again.
And they're gonna have to revise that once this goes into effect.
Well,
They may use surplus money, they may not have to.
And what's your concern with the use of?
well, if the way we've got to where they produce this, and has been 3 previous years using ARPA, and then you use surplus money in between, and the surplus money goes, does that mean we're gonna have to raise these fees
Because it'll
again?
set up an expectation at a certain budget level.
Well, that seems to be what we've done
Pandemic expectation.
over a 5-year period. And I'm just anticipating that if you're using one-time reserve monies for that, at some point that runs out. When does it run out? And we are expected to,
I mean, that's a potential that you will have to deal with if you run out of surplus after using it to cover that margin. You might either need to reduce the amount that's going to be spent per year. It's around 47, and the clean water revenue sources is around 20, James, 27, 28.
Total clean water fund?
The total clean water fund's like 47, but the revenue that's generated is,
From the PTT?
yeah.
From the PTT, it's typically about 8 to 9.
And then, but all of those revenue is,
Oh, from the clean water fund, it's usually like $25 million.
$25 million.
Across the resources.
right.
yeah, this shows for this year, 28.5 and 46 in total, but 7.5 is surplus. It just begs the question. We had 3 years where we had ARPA money, now we're using up.
And they may need to restructure the recommendation, so maybe because some of that's capital money, maybe they're gonna say, all right, the capital money this year, we're not gonna use surplusage, we're not gonna bump up the program at A&R for that, we're gonna just let it ride at the federal level. And so you won't be spending surplusage on that. You could say you're not gonna spend. How much is going to ag in that? It's probably like, it's like for the ag special fund, I think it's 3, and then there's additional money. You might have to adjust that for what goes to ag, so that you're not using surplusage. So there's potential need to look at that going into the future, but you will still have those dedicated 25 to $28 million in revenue. You're still gonna have the capital funds that you get from the feds. Well, hopefully.
PTT.
So I did read the bill earlier, I don't have it in front of me right now. Is there anything in the bill that asks for that analysis going forward?
Not specific to surplusage, but that's what the board does every
They
year.
do that anyway, but I mean,
Where's the repeal?
the suggestion that Senator Westman is
Sunset
making is
it.
how do we keep
Repeal the
from
sunset?
staying reliant on what we were using before, the ARPA funds. We've all said we don't want to keep escalating,
But
trying to wean ourselves away.
that report, and it's not specifically in that report, but that report has a link to it about, doesn't it have in the, right underneath the table?
It says, yeah, the Clean Water Board site,
Yeah,
yeah.
And so you link to that and they tell you what they're proposing for effectively the use of surplusage.
My question, I'm not questioning the need here and, or any of that. We're building an expectation level and
I understand.
And I hear you say, but I don't expect them to say they're gonna wanna cut this because we're under some federal pressure to do all of this unless they back down or something. And
Well, the federal pressure was really about getting to 27, or getting to a dedicated amount annually that was going to clean water that EPA thought was sufficient. And they originally set that number around 35, the state came up with 27, 28, and then there's additional money that's almost always available from the feds and from,
Well, there
Senator
has,
Leahy used to
there
be.
has been, and Senator Leahy.
Right.
Okay. I do see in here that the compensation for the study committee is limited to 8 meetings. But they can be more, but the compensation.
Right, yeah.
And it's coming out of A&R's budget,
A&R's budget.
so we don't have to make room for it in the budget.
I expect that they're gonna need more than 8 meetings. I expect they'll probably come back to you next year.
And I assume this statutory reference is the language where if they're getting paid, they can't get the compensation, they can't get the per diem.
That's in 1010.
Okay, so the 32, 10, 10, that's where.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So a lot of these people can't.
Right, you're not gonna be paying, the designee from the agency, et cetera.
Okay, Senator Brennan?
Just going back to the property transfer tax repeal of the sunset. I'm reading in the fiscal note, it says, I'm kind of wondering what the difference is if we decreased the contribution to 0.04% in 27, right? Am I reading that right? How much does that drop? Because it currently pulls in around 8.2 million, correct?
Yeah.
So offhand, does anybody know what that, we're repealing that reduction that was to take place in 27.
Right, and it would continue as 0.22.
Until-
1 million off the top going into the Vermont Housing Conservation Trust to pay for the bond.
So if we did the repeal, I think your question is if we did do the repeal, how much less money would it be?
Yeah, how much less does that 0.04% bring in if we did yeah,
I mean, just
you know what I mean?
backing out, it's gonna be like $800,000.
That 0.04%. So,
James
know-
is behind you.
Yeah, and he's waving his hand.
Yeah.
Fiscal office, we haven't run projections for what a continuation of the clean water surcharge at 0.04% would be,
Okay.
Senator. But I can do some quick back of the envelope math for you.
that's what I was trying to do, but that wasn't my forte.
Sure. What I
Off the
can
cuff.
say is that my understanding of agency natural resources positions, that they've committing a certain level of funding to clean water initiatives for phosphorus reduction in the Lake Champlain and Lake Michigan basins to EPA, and those assumptions are based around the property transfer of tax clean water surcharge at more or less its current level. I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have the immediate.
No, I understand that, and I'm all for it. I'm just wondering why we're repealing the rest of the sunset, which really doesn't go away until 2039. That's 14 years away. Why don't we let it ride instead of repealing the sunset now?
Let it ride at what rate though?
Well, so at the 2.2, I mean, you're not gonna reduce it by, I hope I'm reading this right, but you're not gonna decrease it by 0.04. Let it ride at the 2.2.
Yeah.
Where it is. I don't know why we're repealing something that doesn't go away until 2039.
Again, that conversation was had in the House, and there were definitely members that wanted to propose a sunset, or to leave the 2039 date there. The concept is that the legislature always has the authority to sunset that. Right now, you don't know how much money you will need. There likely will be a continuing need after 2039.
There likely may not be though. I mean, you could look at that either way, and you know more about it than I do. We may be, you're probably right, but
2039 is quite a ways away.
it's quite a ways away. It's,
Yeah, and
I understand.
and I pointed out to Senator Watson already, said when we get done, I got a question on the repeal portion. You just jumped on it here, and what I'd like to see, I guess, is 2039 is a long ways away, and if you don't have some kind of a check back, shall we say, people forget, And I think that's too much time. I'd like to say like every 3 years there. And if we can change whatever the percentage we may need or may not need, but that's a long time away. It's kind of like gives them carte blanche, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's sort of what do you want as the default? Do you want to default as that you're collecting it, or to have it, get to the point where, it's sunsetting next year or the next 2 years, and then have to go through the process of unsunsetting?
I don't look at, no one's gonna unsunset. I mean, if we just put it in a 3-year basis, we won't forget about it, is what I'm saying. Just 2025 now, we got 14 years down the road. We may not be here. I'm sure I'm not going to be here.
But by a check back, do you just mean say a recommendation from the board whether to adjust the amount or sunset it every 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
Or do you mean an actual, if you just answer my question?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna change it to have some kind of sunset, I would not recommend the next 3 years, particularly because there are other obligations that are coming down the road. I mean, 2038 is.
But if
yeah,
it's just a recommendation that comes, say, with the board's recommended budget, each year it remains in law until you change it.
Mhm.
So then you'll have the debate every 3 years about, it'll be like when you had the deer herd on the floor every year. It's like,
That's what we
that'll
want to
be,
recreate.
right.
We love debating.
Yeah.
Those were good times, as I hear, debating the deer herd on the floor.
I mean, I do see some value in having sunsets on any fees that we create so that they don't just kind of get lost in the base because you're just not thinking about it unless there's other reports happening. I don't know what committees, if you guys took a hard stand on this and would feel like we're intruding in on your policy thing, but I think from a fiscal perspective, it's good to at least ask them, what the rate should be and should it be revealed every, could be 5 years.
3 to 5 years, something like that. 14 is a long time, so.
I agree.
For what it's worth, we didn't spend a lot of time on this particular part just to understand what it did, and knowing that there was a huge need for this, at least in the near future. So the other date that comes to mind, because there's the deadline for the new deadline in here is 2028 for the permits to be completed, and then those are for permits in the Lake Memphremagog and Lake Champlain watersheds. But then there's another deadline for, I believe it's like all the other watersheds. So the eastern and southern parts of the state, going into Connecticut River, etc.
2032.
And that's 2032.
2038.
Yeah, okay, that sounds about right. So 2038 is, there's going to be more pressure on those other places to do this work beyond 2028. So if I was going to suggest a time to revisit it, it would, I mean, on the one hand, you could look at 2028 because that's the permit deadline for this work. Actually, that's not true, because once you have the permit, then you have 5 years to get it done. So there's going to be more costs. So 5 years after that would take us to 2033. And so that would cover the time period for those two watersheds. And then there's going to be a whole other suite of folks that are going to feel this pressure to get this work done elsewhere. So and then after 2038, they'll have 5 years to get that work done. So just so you have all the dates in your head as to how this plays out. I would be hesitant to do it anytime before 2033. If that makes sense.
What if it's a report and not a repeal?
A report, I think, would be fine to determine what the proper rate should be and how much time they think they would need it for,
What their,
sure.
what the rate should be and when would they recommend a repeal be?
Yeah.
placed?
That'd be fine.
And
Make that executive.
like in 3 years, or what time frame do you think that report should be done? Or do you think that should wait till 2030?
To get the report?
Yeah.
The report, I'm open to, I mean, I would want to hear from the department about like, how much time do you think they need? But if we could give them a little bit of time, like the next 2 or 3 years to get back to us with that report, I think that would be.
Well, yeah, I was thinking 3 or 5 years till they get through this next phase. So 2030.
Yeah, that would be great.
Is that an amendment that you could draft for?
Yeah. I just put it as part of the,
You don't like that, Norm?
I don't like that, no.
I mean,
A&R takes a lot of time to do a lot of things anyways right now. Okay,
it wouldn't be NR, it would be the
Yeah.
Clean Water
Board.
Okay, that's just,
Board.
it seems like just give them carte blanche here. 5 years down the road, there's gonna be projects going on every year for the next 30 years. But I just don't agree with putting it out that far and saying, okay, we got time days, you're always gonna have the time days after a while, so you're always gonna have
The what?
the days and times projects get done, whatever else that you're referring to. Ongoing thing, it's always gonna be happening. So I don't know why you'd be opposed to a 5-year check back
Well, what do you mean by a check
on the
back?
repeal.
Well,
Right now it
isn't that what you just discussed?
Yeah, that's what we're discussing now, Mike.
But a report from the Clean Water Fund Board in 2030, which is 5 years.
I'm just talking about the repeal of the sunset.
Right, and they're gonna recommend whether or not to repeal or not, or to adjust the rate.
That's
Is
not-
that a check back, or is that?
You want a repeal in 5 years?
No, I just want every 5 years so that we don't let this run till 2039.
Right, you get a report
Untethered.
back.
Okay, if you're gonna get the report in 5 years, that's fine, but
So, maybe we could add to that, something like requesting that the rates be reviewed
There
by.
you
Yeah,
I can live with
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Review
so that we'll get a report and then direct, either the Clean Water Board or, that legislature to review the recommendations. Does that make sense? Or review the rates?
Consider running?
I want to clarify something. Is there any way, you mentioned 2033.
Yeah.
Could we extend the sunset to 2033? Have a report close to that date to tell us what's going, to let us know if that's, rather than just repeal something, repeal the sunset, let us know. You can do both, I think. My suggestion would be to just extend the sunset to 2033 instead of repealing. Okay, and then ask for a report also in that same time frame. Does that make any sense?
Sounds good.
The current sunset is what date now?
2039.
2039.
So that makes
it'll
it
be
even-
6 years different,
But shorter.
but,
It's shorter.
that's a big policy decision.
Yeah, I mean, I would sooner go with a report and review.
Yeah, because we're getting rid of the 27 date,
Yes.
that's the other one that goes to 39. I think if we get a report, it could be in 2029 that says, when should we put a repeal based on the work, and should the rate be adjusted? And have it come both to appropriation and Senator Natural, then we would have that information. Because it seems like right now as the appropriations committee, we're just trying to pick a date. And
Yeah.
we don't have all the information, we don't have full visibility into that, so I think if we could ask for a report and then take that information that we get in 3 years.
Mhm.
That would be 2029.
Yeah, as long as, I guess
You just gotta get.
that's the
reelected.
best we can do, but I can almost guarantee you in 2033 even, or 2039, whether the money's needed or not, nobody's gonna be here to pay attention to instilling a new sunset or putting a You will be, I won't be, but,
Right.
so, that's my concern.
Yeah, it's a point well taken, but I think part of it is our, we have to take responsibility, or the hope that the future legislature will take responsibility of taking these reports seriously and weighing in on
They will all be Gen Z.
it. Yeah, they love reports.
An older millennial.
I don't even know what that is.
My daughter's
Yeah,
Gen
mine too.
I'm not
Well,
sure about it.
I think that's something that I could support, that
I'm not
we
sure
wanna,
about that.
we wanna have more
generation either.
information about this instead of just saying there's no sunset timeline.
Yeah.
Come back and give us the more information about a sunset and the rate, because maybe there's not a sunset, but the rate can be reduced, so that we're not having this, we're just having more eyes on this act.
So I can bring you language, but I have to go to Weezy.
Yeah, you're already late. Well, it doesn't have to be today, you know, it's not like a pro tem is forcing us to stay here for the whole month of May, so you have 3 weeks. Yeah. No, but if we could, and we're not gonna meet tomorrow, so we could take it up on Tuesday.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay. Good?
So what are you shooting for on the report, 5 years, 4 years? What'd you
Could
decide?
be 29, I was gonna say,
29?
have a little quicker,
That's fine.
maybe
Okay.
still be here if we do it that time.
Oh,
Just gotta get reelected.
Yeah,
2 more times.
So
Never-
2029, and then how many years thereafter? Every 4 years thereafter, or every 5 years thereafter?
Well, 4 years is 2 bienniums.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
I think we're done, unless Senator Norris has a question.
No, I just had a question for you that went up on live
Okay,
in reference to, page 4, which is the wrong page.
yeah,
Line
that's
13.
page 4 somewhere.
It was supposed to be like 11:46 or something like that in the calendar.
Yeah, I sent you this email. Did you see that email? Do you have,
About the grant.
about that it said competitive?
It says
Yeah,
competitive.
I have several emails, asked Scott more about that, so.
And I wonder if we could ask the DEC, right? Or no, Department of Housing and Conservation Development. I thought if you have a contact over there, you could send an email and say, what would they do if they saw this word competitive in there? Would they like, oh no, we can't give it to the entity that we know about, we're gonna have to do an RFP? Or could it be, how are they reading that language? And we don't even know where that language came from.
Nor does Wendy, Santa
Nor
Harrison.
does Senator Harrison.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was surprised to see it too. So-
Well then.
So what I did say to Senator Harrison is that it's firmly a capital bill issue now, but I said if our committee's intent was not to be competitive, unless it's competitive for a women's recovery center in the town of St. Albans or something.
It's not quite intent, but.
Yeah,
No, it's just supposed to be bought, right?
Yeah.
Not
Right.
competitive.
yeah, so, but we can, so I said we would, that was our intent, that it wasn't competitive, so that, I encourage her just to have floor amendment to take that out.
Yeah, it'd be that easy, just remove
Yeah.
that.
So she's working also with Dutch Council and to figure out, and I don't know if that, yeah. I don't know if there's more language, because sometimes we have a language like that, and then they have our E language where there's more language.
Right.
If that's just a descriptor and there's more language, so we'll track that down.
The Walleye Association wasn't competitive, I was just wondering what Hope Road.
Yeah.
LCI wasn't
Good point.
competitive.
I learned more about the walleyes. Okay, so we can